Hello, everyone. I am Lars with On the Fringes of Sound, and today we are talking with Michael. Probably know him better as Sunwarper. How you doing, Mike?
I'm well, Lars. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for joining us. Let's talk about your new album. So I noticed listening this release, like it definitely fits in with your catalog of all the other stuff that you've done. A lot of the themes that you touch on consistently. What was your inspiration exactly behind creating and releasing an album in pieces throughout the year, as opposed to just putting it all out there all at once?
Yeah, so there were a few reasons. The first was I wanted to just try something new for me. And that was, I've always tried to, when I write music, capture a certain moment, like how I'm feeling or something akin to that. And so for this, the idea was throughout one year, every month I'm trying to journal that month, so to speak, in audio format. So like a good example of that is with the song Obi. My fiance and I rescued a dog, and we named him Obi. And that song was all about trying to capture that like innocence and just how he sees the world. You know, this little dog that is finding love. He was abandoned. He was living out in a creek with his mom, or what they think was his mom. So, I mean, he has a lot of issues. He gets scared of humans really easily, but you can see him start to learn to love and like enjoy the world. He didn't even know how to play originally. And then all of a sudden he starts playing with us. He's running around with us. And so seeing that joy come from him just was like, I want to try to remember that and capture that, you know, in my heart and in my mind and in music format, which is the best way I know how to speak, you know, my emotions out. And so that's why it's just one piano, and it's like in the higher register to try and capture that kind of like playful innocence. And so that was the main driving factor for the monthly releases. But the other reason, and this is more personal, is I have a lot of anxiety when it comes to releases. You know, like I build up in my head all these sorts of things, like how it will, you know, how I'm going to put it out and things like that. And so I said, I just want to try and work on that and force myself to just call a song done. You know, you have a set release date, and on that date, no matter what you've got that month, it's got to come out. And it definitely helped, you know, like, I mean, how could it not help if you're just trying to get this stuff out? But it also just showed me that, you know, this whole chasing perfection doesn't mean anything, because you'll just keep trying to make small tweaks that make things worse because one thing gets louder than the other, and then you're tweaking that, and then that makes another issue. So you just get it to sound what I like to call impeccable rather than perfect, and get it out there.
Gotcha. That was unexpectedly heartwarming, though.
Oh, well, yeah, that was kind of the point of the album for me, is that I really wanted to capture those moments in my life over the course of a year, and hopefully either the listener can feel that or associate that with their own memories, either from a month or just from when they found my music or something like that.
You know, in your Audionautic videos, you know, you do with Curtis, and you guys talk a lot about gear and creative process and stuff. So can you give us a little bit more insight into your personal kind of creative workflow and the tools that you use?
Yeah, sure. So if you look around, I have a bunch of stuff. I'm really fortunate and consider myself lucky to have it. But if you would have asked me this before Future Fade, I would have said, oh, I take this whole approach where I compose in, you know, MIDI on the computer, and then I add all these live instruments. And sometimes I'll have 4 tracks of the same sort of chord progression or same track, but different inversions and all these things to thicken the sound and stuff. And I still love that approach. And my next album has a lot of that. But with Future Fade, you know, I was working on very short time constraints, because I wrote, recorded, mixed, and released one song every month. Like there wasn't any stuff in the backlog or something like that that I would release. And so I had to really focus on just going in the box and maybe adding for a few some, you know, bells and whistles or something like that outside. But it got me to really explore soft synths and sample libraries like Spitfire Audio. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they have a bunch that they release for free. And then they also have some really great like pianos and things like that. And I had never messed with stuff like that before, like those sample libraries. And so that was one of the ways that I really experimented with my sound approach for Future Fade.
Yeah. The sample libraries, like I know everybody gives like samples and loops, like a lot of crap, like, oh, you use loops or whatever. But you can get a lot of really good inspiration in there. So
Yeah. And when I say sample libraries, I mean more like piano sound, and it just uses sampled audio to make like a piano. But yeah, loops are really cool too. Like I use a lot of drum loops when I start something, just to get something in the background. Well, not future fade, that was mostly ambient, but
right.
for my beat focused music, I like to add a lot of samples of drums, like ones that I have not ripped off from something, but and yeah, you put those underneath a drum, or you use that as a basis, and then I build up a drum around that. And so there's usually 3 or 4 layers of drums, one being the sample that's all chopped up, and then the rest I added on top.
So when you're doing that, do you ever like you put your drum sample there and then you start building on top of it? Do you ever have one of those instances where it's like, oh, that original loop's got to go now, there's too much going on?
Oh yeah, definitely. I don't typically like to do that though, and I'll usually try to take mine out, or I'll try to do a 1-to-1 copy of the loop, but with my own drum sampler. And it's not always the same because I'm not a drummer, and I'm using a keyboard to do it, or a MIDI keyboard to try and do it. But I like having that human sound. And so even my drums, when I make them, I always put them off the grid, move them just a couple, just shut off the snap and move it just a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right. Because it just, I don't know, like it's probably in my head, but I just hear a difference in just the liveliness of it and stuff. And I always want to have that sort of human element. That's why I like to add guitars or my own synths or something like that, performed. It just gives it some sort of energy, at least in my mind, that I really vibe with and want to have. But yeah, sorry, I went off on a tangent a little bit, but yeah, I have had to do that, and I don't like to do that because I feel like it can kind of diminish it. So one thing I'll do is just lower it and put it really quiet in the mix, just so it's kind of there. And like if you listen intently, you may hear it, and it's still giving that energy, but it's not the main focus.
Gotcha. Okay. So do you have a favorite piece of gear that you like to use for a lot of your projects, or?
Yeah, even if it doesn't make it in the final song, it's guitar like that. I have a Nash, the Telecaster that's right there. It's a Nash Telecaster, and
very nice.
I love that thing. I think it's supposed to be like a Fender 54, 57. It's got a humbucker in the neck and a single coil in the bridge pickup, and there's something about that neck. It's just, it plays so nice. And Nash, the company, they age the guitars, and so the neck just, I've never played a better neck on a guitar. And so it just fosters creativity. And a lot of times, like I'll play something on the guitar and then translate it over to piano and then put it in MIDI so that I can build a song around that rather than like an audio recording, because I can always tweak the MIDI. And then I'll do the guitar, later when it's ready to be added in. But yeah, I would say guitar.
Okay. So on this album, specifically Future Fade, was there any new piece of gear or any kind of new technique or anything that you integrated in this album that you hadn't used before?
Yeah, mostly it was just working in the box. That was like exclusively for most songs. That was a new concept for me. And it took me a minute to kind of get comfortable with doing that. I don't know. I just always, like I said, I always had this idea I needed to add external gear to things, just like in my head that made it ready to be released or something. And that's not the case, at least the way that I found it out. And you have so much flexibility in the box, and there's so many things you can do. I feel like for me, I lose that sense of creativity to a degree because I'm not tweaking things by hand. I just lose, there's something lost in that way of doing it, but you gain all this flexibility. And that for me, for this project of just putting things out every month and still trying to put emotional weight to each piece I'm releasing, that flexibility was just incredible.
People are, they say, oh, hardware only, or, oh, I have a DAW-less setup. And it's like, I don't know, because I know a lot of people can get really great results just using software.
Yeah, and if you watch a lot of videos of, like pop music producers and stuff like that, they're getting these pristine sounds, you know, whether you like pop music or not. I'm not debating that. Yeah, we don't need to debate that. It's fine. But you have to admit that on some of those songs, the production quality is top notch, right? I mean, they've got,
Of course.
you know, all these crazy things, right? Well, a lot of those crazy things are VSTs that they're using, and they just know how to use them really well. And so, you know, yeah, it's totally possible.
And I'd like to add, a lot cheaper.
It's true, yeah. And it's also a space thing too. I mean, how crazy is it that you can have a tiny little MIDI keyboard or even no keyboard, and you can get just any sound at your, I mean, not fingertip, I guess, if it's in the computer, but kind of at your fingertip, you know, just, you can have anything you want. I mean, just like, I guess to the point, one of the things I started using a ton was Repro and Diva from Yuhi.
I haven't heard of that, actually.
Oh, dude, yeah, Diva is everywhere, I guess. It's a total CPU hog on your computer, but it just is insane the things you can do with it and how flexible it is as a synth. And like that, it's in the box, but you can get crazy sounds out of it.
I have to check that out. You said,
yeah, I would check it out. Repro 5, so they're both by Yuhi, U-He, and Repro 5 is their answer to a Prophet 5, like the vintage synth, which is awesome. And they also have Repro 1, which is the answer to Prophet 1. And then Diva is this crazy, just, you can change all the sort of filters, and it's nuts. It's just completely massive with what you can do with it.
Wow. All right. Yeah, I'll have to check that one out.
Yeah, well worth looking into.
On your latest album, you did a physical release for the very first part of Future Fade. You put it out on vinyl. So is that something that's here to stay for you, or is this just kind of a one-off thing?
Well, I love vinyl. It's always a goal of mine to have a release on vinyl. And yeah, the Future Fade Part 1 was awesome, and I loved putting that out. We put it out through the Audionautic label that we're doing. The issue with vinyl is, you know, that there's a lot of barriers as a independent artist to get vinyl out there. Yeah, it's money. There's, you know, huge, you've probably seen a lot of musicians and labels talking about how the vinyl producers are having issues making it, you know, and it's delayed for months, even years maybe. So there's a lot of issues. So those were lathe cut vinyls, which are a little bit different from a vinyl. It's I don't know the exact differences and stuff, but they are different. You can make them in smaller quantities, but they cost per vinyl cost more, but they're made in smaller quantities and things like that. I have some ideas for releasing on vinyl again, especially with some future projects I have coming up for Sunwarper, but I'm not there yet with it done. I got to finish the project first before I can really kind of figure out that, but I would love to have more vinyl releases. Yeah.
Okay. Have you thought about going to cassette tape? I've noticed that's becoming very popular, and I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I've been buying cassette tapes from certain labels just across the internet lately. There's something very fun and like early 90s feel to me.
Yeah, they're really cool. That is something I would like to look into. I just don't know where to get started with that. I just have to look into it. But yeah, I would love to put something out on cassette. So I do have a question though for you. So you said you've bought some cassettes. Do you listen to them? Do you have a method of listening to them?
Actually, so I have a just a cheap little, like, it was like a Walkman clone on Amazon of all things.
So do they still make products that like new that you can listen to cassette with?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, okay.
I found out the reason that cassette never actually died is, believe it or not, prisons. So in prisons, they're not allowed to have CDs because it's apparently easy to make weapons out of them. So prisons contracted with various companies to keep producing like cassette tapes and cassette players, mainly like see-through ones. So, you know, you couldn't hide anything in there. But it's funny because if you look at it, like a lot of famous artists, like for instance, Kanye West, pretty much every single one of his albums has also been released on cassette. You just never see it in the stores.
Yeah,
it is released on cassette and distributed through certain channels, so people who are currently in prison can listen to it.
Interesting. Yeah, because I I know cassette's been making a comeback in terms of people buying it and stuff. And I just thought maybe it was just because they're cool to have, like it's a cool little thing and you can make colored cassettes and all that. But I always wondered, is there a way that you could conveniently keep listening to these, because I mean, what car has a cassette deck anymore, or whatever you even call it? I don't know. And then, things like that. Like I have a 4-track cassette recorder, so I guess I could play it on that. But how many people have one of those? So
right.
I was just curious if they have a means of listening. So that's really cool that you can still get that.
I told my wife that when I get back, I'm going to buy another car. I'm going to make sure that I buy something that's like from 93 or before, because then I'll know that it has
bump all those cassettes. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
but it does have a sound. That's what I love about cassette, right? It's got that. And like I've recorded a little bit into this 4-track, and it gives it that color, and it's really cool. So yeah, there's something about physical releases that are just so special when you buy one.
It's one of those situations where you go on the internet and you can find music just everywhere, especially since our nemesis / friend Spotify is out there. Physical releases are a great touch because it's like, I actually put this to a physical medium as opposed to just floating out there in the ether of the internet.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. And finally, I wanted to talk a bit about your work on Audionautic. So you and Curtis started this show up. What was the inspiration for starting that up? And where do you see it going in the future? Because I know at this point, it's a YouTube show, podcast, a stream, and now it's a label too. So
yeah,
you guys are dipping your toes into everything.
Yeah. Well, so I met Curtis on Instagram through hashtags, which is totally random. We're across, he was in Vietnam and I was in California, right? And so completely on the other side of the world, totally weird, different time zones between us. So conversations were, stop, start and things like that. We discovered each other through, some music hashtag, because he was doing these really cool jams with like a GoPro on his head or something, playing guitar, looping things. And I was trying to get into doing that sort of thing. And I don't remember I think he found me through the hashtag, and then we started talking and stuff like that. I asked him for advice on how his setup is, because I was about to do some live shows. This was before the pandemic and all that. And then we just, we came to discover that we're both lifelong learners and are always trying to learn and grow. And, we were so eager to share secret sauce, of music that we do, that we know the way we do our music. And we just had this idea like that if we could foster a community that is all about that, sharing the ways we all create, because we all have a different way of creating and none of them are right or wrong. They're all just what works for us, but you can always learn from someone else and incorporate that into your own and grow. Curtis always likes to say, together we grow. And I think that's a good way to describe it, is that's the whole design aesthetic of Audionautic, is together we grow. We're all trying to share and learn. So we interview people on the podcast. We share some of the things we learn. We just added the Billows Burn Bright and his show, Ambient Music for Ambient People, to our radio part. And that's awesome. I love what he's doing with that. And his music is awesome. So yeah, that is just, it's all about just fostering a community that is trying to learn from each other and grow as musicians, as people, everything. And in terms of future plans, we want to keep growing the label. That's a big part, and add some people to the roster, keep doing those. We do twice a year compilation with money going to a charity that we choose with the artists on the label and in the compilation. And then I think the next big thing we want to get into is doing live streams. We're actually going to be doing one for our patrons. That's going to be like a Audionautic happy hour, so to speak, where the team, which is Curtis, Eon Lake, Billows Burn Bright, and myself are going to be on it. We'll have the patrons in the chat. We'll just be talking kind of like, it'll be in January. So we're talking year end, wrap ups, what we've learned from the year, all that sort of stuff. And just whatever the patrons want to talk about, we'll be talking about, with the end goal being that we get our podcasts into a more live stream sort of way, so that we'll be doing the light speeds and the star streams as live streams.
Kind of like people are going to be able to comment and ask questions like as the podcast is going.
Yeah, that's kind of the idea. And so we're going to test the waters with that Patreon happy hour, so to speak, and see, you know, how it works, figure it out, and refine it from there. And then I don't know when we're planning to do the live stream sort of stuff, but that is what's in the future for 2022.
Very
we have
cool.
a few other things, but we're not quite ready to announce it yet. So you just have to follow along if you want to watch it or find out when it comes out. For me personally, as Sunwarper, I want to start doing more live streams. I've been doing, I know you just talked about how it's the devil, but Dawless jams. I've been doing some Dawless jams with the circuit tracks and my synths over here. And I'm getting the new Roland SP404. I think it's back ordered, but that's on the way. Because it's been a really freeing type of way of making music. Like as soon as you hit record, whatever mix you've got and the sounds you hit, that's it. You know, you can't go back and change it. I really like it. I don't think I'd do it as like a proper release, like a finished product, but I love doing those. It's just so much fun. So that's something I want to do more of, like live stream sets of that sort of thing. Yeah,
as opposed to just going back and endlessly tweaking every parameter. Like, no, let me just
I'm trying to stop that.
Yeah,
even in the computer work, you know, like it's just get it to a point where it sounds great and I'm happy with it. And then, you know, if the bass is 0.5 too loud, so be it, whatever. That's the way it is.
Final version. Yeah. I'm serious this time. Final version. No, for real. This is the final version. Yeah.
Final part 2 version. Yeah. Absolute final version 3. Yeah.
Thanks a lot for joining us. I'm glad we got to hear about some of the stuff that Audionautics got going on. New album is great. I'm looking forward to those B-sides that you guys that you promised us.
Oh yeah, Reminiscent Remnants, if you don't mind a quick plug. That's what I like to call a companion album to Future Fates. So I wrote a ton of songs and not all of them fit the vibe I was going for. And so they're coming out in January as a B-sides and alternate takes release.
And that's
I think it's January 21st. Let me look at the calendar, give you a proper date. January 19th on Bandcamp, and then on streaming January 21st. So I did have the right date in my head, at least for one part.
So that's going to be like another full album basically that goes.
Yeah, it's another 12 songs. 2 of them are live versions that I've released on YouTube of Reality Tether and Obi, using that live set jam setup I was talking about. So it's a very different vibe of those 2 songs. And then the rest are, one of them's like the first song, the title track, is a much darker electronic ambient, all these synths and arpeggios and stuff like that. And then most of them are much more guitar focused and like ambient drones with guitar. And it just, that wasn't, other than Arctic Horizon, that wasn't really where I wanted to go with Future Fades. So I just was like, well, it'll work. I mean, it's still part of that idea of capturing certain moments and things like that. It just wasn't for Future Fade. So it's this release.
So like, would you say like the Future Fade was more for like kind of the lighter side of things, and then you have the B-sides for the darker? Kind of.
I think the easiest way to describe it is, so Future Fade originally, I wanted it to be 3 parts, I think was what the original plan was. And part 1, which released as part 1 originally on the vinyl, like you were talking about, was very synth driven. And then part 2 was going to be very guitar focused. And then part 3 was going to be like orchestral. And you can kind of hear remnants of that in some of the songs in the middle part of Future Fade, where it's very like neoclassical with orchestral sample libraries and things like that. But it kind of went its own route, and I just wanted to follow that. So the songs that I had as ideas, I just kind of fleshed out for Reminiscent Remnants as these guitar based ones and things like that. So kind of lighter dark. There is a bit of that in it. When you listen to it, you'll see the kind of juxtaposition of that. But I think the easiest thing was just like in my head, it was, oh, this doesn't fit the like design choices I'm now going for.
Okay. Yeah, I gotcha. Just you're listening to it, it's like, this doesn't fit, but this doesn't fit.
It like still has a piece of that idea, but it just wasn't where I wanted to go.
Yeah, especially when you're making a 12 song album. You know, you end up making a lot, and there's some stuff you're just like,
yeah, exactly. But you feel like they still have merit, and you still want to put it out there into the world. But it just like, as that part, it didn't fit. But I thought that it would be really cool, and I talked with Josh about it, and he was like, yeah, this companion album would be a really good idea. Like it's still part of this theme and concept, but it's its own thing as well.
I definitely appreciate you joining us, Mike. Glad to hear about all your work at Audionautic. Excited to see what happens there in the future. You guys do like some amazing work. I would love to see some more of the. I remember you guys did the samples you put out, and then you had everybody.
Dude, your
submit.
track was awesome. Sorry to cut you off, but man, that
No,
track
you're
was so cool. You got to put
Yeah.
that thing out, man. It was awesome.
Oh yeah, I got to go back and look at that. I've been getting distracted with like every other thing. Like I know I may seem like, yeah, I seem like I'm so organized and I've got everything going, but it's like, no, it's what you're looking at is just a giant pile. And every once in a while, I just kind of like dig in the pile. It's like we're going to do this next.
There you go. I mean, hey, if it works though, right?
Appreciate you, Mike. Thanks a lot for joining us. Everybody needs to check out Future Fade. If you aren't already subscribed to Audionautic, make sure you check them out. You guys do a video once a week?
So we do some sort of video once a week. It's either we rotate between radio or the podcast.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Definitely enjoy your podcast, the radio. So whenever I'm having to do schoolwork, that 9 times out of 10, that's my study playlist.
I really appreciate that, man. That's awesome.
You guys got like great stuff on there.
Yeah, that's almost all. Well, that was all Curtis, and then now we're moving it to Billows Burn Bright, and they both just knock it out of the park with what they do on that. It's awesome. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And Lars, great. I just want to say I really appreciate you having me on here, and I love everything you're doing with On the Fringes of Sound and this whole. I don't know if you want to call it like version 2.0. But with the interviews and the mixes you're doing and all that stuff, it's awesome, man. Yeah, I love it.
I appreciate it. Like I enjoy doing reviews and stuff, but I want to move into other stuff too. Again, Mike, thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you again later.
Yeah, thanks for having me.